We love you guys. Today we have with us Joe from Lightphone, and he's going to be sharing some of his experiences with running a pre-launch campaign with Indiegogo. Just really quick, if someone could say whether or not they can hear me. I know I get like 100 of these in 5 seconds, but cool, awesome. That's all I needed. Thank you guys. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started really quick. Today, like I said, we're going to be talking about pre-launch pages and the importance of having them and getting started with your campaign without starting from ground zero. This is our agenda for the day. We're first just kind of chat really quickly about landing page creation. Then we're going to go into like testing your messaging, some lower budget and higher budget strategies. Then we're going to introduce you guys to our newest feature for the pre-launch page, which is not widely available yet, but as part of our webinar audience, you guys are really getting the first introduction to this. And so we'd love to have you part of the pilot. And so later on, we're going to send out a sign up email. And so feel free to sign up for that. We're going to let a pretty good handful of you guys test this out with us. And it's going to be eventually launched to the general public. So we'd love to hear all of your feedback about this. And then we're going to chat with Joe over here from Lightphone, and he's going to tell you guys about his experience running a pre-launch page with Indiegogo. And then finally, we're going to conclude with questions. I'm seeing some questions already about whether or not we're going to share this with the audience. We will definitely follow up with a recording of this. So if you have to leave early, it's not really a big deal. All of this will be available to you later on. Throughout the webinar, if you want to go ahead and type out any questions you might have, we will be sure to answer them as they come through or at the very end even. I repeat myself a few times because we tend to have people join in halfway through. So like forgive me if I say some of these same things a few times. So let's go ahead and get started. So people want to know, first of all, why pre-launch matters. This is kind of a concept that not everyone is familiar with. People don't really often realize how important it is to take some time before your campaign to actually build your audience out. No matter what sort of project you're actually launching in a vacuum is not always a great idea. Sometimes you get really, really lucky and you make a product that's a huge hit. But oftentimes what will happen is it's a pretty crowded landscape and you end up launching in a bit of a silent vacuum. And so if you don't end up getting 30% of your goal in the first 48 hours, that's really the number we throw out a lot that really measures success. 30% just because that tends to be where people who aren't already introduced to your product will convert at a higher rate. And so 30% really just is like a small percentage of your bar. And so you want to think really deeply about how you're setting your goal and how that advances you towards creating your project. But again, keep that 30% in mind. So usually we recommend having about 3 months of pre-launch prep, which is kind of a long time. And I know people get really eager about starting their project and putting this out into the universe, but without a little bit of time beforehand, hammering down your messaging, hammering down how you plan on presenting this to your audience, what ends up happening is you launch your first draft of a product. And that's really not the draft that you want to put out there. So this is a really good time, like I said, to test out any messaging that you have and seeing how your audience is reacting to one tactic over another. So our first thing we're going to show here, this is an example of a landing page that we had on Indiegogo for the Reolink Go campaign. This is available to everyone right now. So if you were to create an Indiegogo campaign in your draft, you'd have the option to do this. It's pretty simple. As you can see, it's really just a distilled version of your campaign page. The most prominent thing that you'll notice here is that there is a email sign up section. This is really kind of the bread and butter of the landing page and the pre-launch page. The whole point of this is usually to collect people's email addresses so that way you have a better idea of who's actually going to be interested in day one. As we all know, nobody likes sharing their email addresses. It's a thing we hold pretty close to our hearts. You don't want to get a lot of spam from campaigners, and so when you get to the point of already getting someone's email address, you know that they're a lot more likely to convert. And so the whole point of this is to actually get people to that point. It's just kind of a one-pager. There's not a whole lot of information there. Like I said, it's pretty distilled. It's really just like a teaser that you show them. So at the top, you'll see that there's a section for a video. There's a few different product sections and feature sections. And if you were to scroll down on an actual pre-launch page, you'd notice that there's a little bit more at the end. But it's pretty short. It's really brief. And this will help you nail down what your key and primary messaging actually is. You just want to figure out what the actual features are that people are going to be interested in once you actually launch your campaign. So the steps to creating a pre-launch page, this is actually pretty easy stuff. For the most part, people get this up and running within an hour, or it's possible to get it up and running within an hour. You might want to take a little longer than that and running this by a few members of your close community to make sure that this is actually making a lot of sense. But the first step is obviously loading a relevant image at the very top. If we scroll back real quick, you'll see that Railink has this really nice shot of the product in action. Right after that, you want to have the product value prop, so the value prop of what the product is, what it does, and why is it exciting. It's important to think about how you stand out against your competitors and what's actually interesting about your product. And so this is kind of where you address that. So all of this, just to pop back really quickly, all of these sections with features helps you really understand why this is a great battery powered camera. So you can see that it has Wi-Fi, it works anywhere, it's easy to set up. These are kind of the things that they're working through. And so finally, you want to make sure that you include a clear incentive. So why do they need to sign up now? This is what we call the carrot. This is included on every single Indiegogo pre-launch page. As you can see, there is that section for your email. This is just the default. What we really recommend doing is having some sort of discount here. So it is, again, pretty hard for people to give their email away. What makes it easier is a small discount. So if I knew that I was going to get 40% off of a product, if I put my email down and was emailed on the first day about it and knew when it was going live, I would be much more likely to actually take that step. So think that through and figure out what the best way to do that is for you. So generally, best practices. This is a screenshot of an existing or it was a recent campaign, the bento bag. And so at the very top, I mentioned they have that teaser video. The teaser video isn't the same thing as your campaign video, though. I mean, if you only have one video, that's totally fine. You can use it here as well. But if you've got the ability to edit it down to 30 seconds or a minute, maybe even, this is a good place to do that. And this is just something to get people excited about what your product is and does, and gives them some basic ideas about how this might fit into their lives. You then want to give them a price range or at least a percentage off. And this is an example with our newest pre-launch feature that I'm going to be talking about a little later. So they're offering actually a perk through their pre-launch phase. And then at the CTA, so your call to action, that should be front and center. People should know what it is that you're actually trying to get them to do here. So whether that means backing early or getting their email address, you want to see. And obviously, A/B testing is really encouraged. This is a space where you can actually figure out your messaging and nail it down before you go fully live. So see if people react really well to perhaps having this sort of language versus something else. And then, of course, you want to show the product in use. And so what that means is having an action shot perhaps, or even you can have people using the product. People tend to react really, really well to actual human beings. So not just having a shot of the bag sitting on a table, actually having someone using it is a good idea. So if you can't decide what features are actually best, creating a survey is really not a bad idea. Your first audience is likely going to be someone like your mom or your dad or your family members. And so products really should be informed by their users. And so if you haven't done any sort of user research yet, just start really close with those that are actually closest to you. And so surveys are really easy to create and send out these days. You can do things like SurveyMonkey or Typeform or even Google Forms, and create some questions that will be helpful to you to figure out what features people are actually interested in and what is actually going to get them to commit. Ask them, obviously, to leave an email address at the very end, and this is just a really great way to convert leads and collect those emails. So you've got your friends, family, and personal contacts down. This is really, I mean, all of this is a pretty hard process, but the people that are easiest to reach out to are those that are actually really, really close to you. And so, get your feet wet with talking to your personal contacts and the people that are already in your life. And so you want to make sure that, at the very first, on day one, your mom, your dad, your siblings, they're all supporting you. It really helps to reach out to your audience and your contacts in a really personal way rather than sending out mass emails. So these aren't the people that are going to react well to like, hey, comma, name, Thanks so much. I can't wait to get your money. These are people that you're really going to want to send very personal messages to. Call them up. Don't be afraid to actually like reach out and get excited and geek out about your project and your product with them. These people really want to know what your backstory is, like why they haven't seen you in 6 or 7 months because you've been working on this project. And getting their support on the first day is really, really important. So don't be afraid to spend some time on this. Um, so the discount obviously really doesn't hurt. Your mom loves you, but it would be even better if she could get 10% off. If you can offer that, that would be great. If it makes sense for your bottom line, definitely think about offering a discount to get them off the fence. One way that we do that is with secret perks. Once you've launched your campaign, secret perks are just this tool that we have where people can provide a small discount or some sort of we give you a link that takes people to a version of the page that has that perk, and they can only access it if they have that link. And so this is a great tool to again get people off the fence. And phone trees or email chains. This is pretty old school stuff, but it actually does work. It's just reaching out to your audience in a close sort of way. So all this to say, you have to get really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's hard to ask people for money. I don't think anyone really likes doing that. And so, like I said, start with your closest friends and family first and get used to asking them. And then after that, kind of move towards the people that would rather not talk to you. And so, boots on the ground tactics, this is really just helping you to nail down your pitch. I always ask campaigners that I talk to give me a really short elevator pitch, even if I already know everything about their product. And this is because it helps me to figure out what they find valuable and important to mention, and the quick things that really stand out about the product. And that helps me figure out what's actually going to work on their page. And these are the things that you really want to focus your messaging on. And so this is a really great way to like build your community from ground up and get some feedback about how people are actually reacting to you in person. So some tactics that you can use. Not all projects are suited to digital marketing, which is one of the major tactics that people will use for crowdfunding. So that just means sending out ads on Facebook, on all the different mediums that we have. A lot of people have to do groundwork and they have to actually get out there and meet people in order to build that first audience. Especially if you're not doing something like a hardware campaign, if you have perhaps a play, or I think my favorite example is when people are selling food. I've actually worked with a lot of campaigners who have had things like yogurt or energy bars or even drinks that they're selling online, and that's a really that's a sense that it's incredibly hard to get across through a computer. And the best way to actually do it is to taste it. And so what that means is maybe setting up on the beach if you live near one, and then having your energy drink available for people to try. What that means is you end up getting some live feedback, and you also get the ability to perhaps even record them. So you have some valuable footage for your video or for your page. This sort of functions as like how you would think of an Amazon review. So going door to door, what I mean by that is not necessarily on doors. This is just connecting with your immediate audience and your network to see if anyone knows anyone that might be interested in this product. And if they say yes, then awesome. Go meet with them, get coffee, just get out there and see what that initial connection looks like, even when it's really, really uncomfortable. Hosting events is a really big part of getting an initial audience. And so what this might mean is if you have some money, going to a conference. But if you don't, smaller events are really still a useful space to meet a friend. I love it when people offer me free food. And so if someone says, okay, I'm going to this thing, it's for a product, and they're talking about, hosting something, sure, yeah, why not? So, just find ways to get people to your events that you might not otherwise see. So we're going to introduce something new to you guys. A lot of these things that we've been talking about so far have really focused on a general pre-launch page and the pre-launch efforts. So right now we're going to chat about the pre-launch perks. And so pre-launch perks, this is the example that we have from Lightphone. And what this means is you can collect pledges prior to actually launching your campaign. So actually, sorry, really quick to interrupt. It sounds like some people are having some issues with sound and other people are fine. What I would recommend doing is just like exiting the webinar and then coming right back in. Usually it's like a connection issue, and that should be fine. And for those of you who are concerned, we're definitely going to be sending this out later on, so you guys can always take a listen afterwards. And for any questions that you have, we will have a dedicated Q&A at the very end. So feel free to post them here and we'll collect them for later. Okay, so back to the webinar. So the Light Phone has this really great example over here. For $250, they were offering the product for a certain percentage off. And this was prior to the campaign actually launching. And so this was for the earliest of their audiences. These were people who didn't necessarily need a full campaign page in order to convert. Like I said, this is a really distilled version of a campaign. And so we want to make sure that the people that you're getting to your pre-launch page with a perk are people who are already pretty aware of what this product is and they've had some interaction with you already. Sending quote unquote cold leads to a pre-launch page often leads to disaster. This is like an audience that's not really likely to convert. You either want to spend time emailing them or working through that audience so that way they're not confused when they show up here and there's not a lot of information, especially if they're already familiar with crowdfunding. This is a whole new version of it. So to get really quickly into why even collect pledges early, yeah, there's a few different reasons. The soft launch strategy is kind of one of the big ones. This is how you can get initial funds raised ahead of your actual launch. And so just to go back quickly, as you can see in this example, this is what a pre-launch perk page looks like. There's no traditional bar where you get to see how many funds have been raised to this point. You really are getting a soft launch as a campaigner with a pre-launch perk. Only you can see how much has been raised. And so this gives you a really good idea of what the interest actually looks like. And so you can track, okay, well, I've sent 200 people to the page and only one person is converted. Maybe something is wrong. Maybe I need to send to more people. You can get a better idea of this before you actually go fully live and test this with a broader audience. It's a really cool way to give back to your community as well. And we're going to go into this more with Lightphone because they were a really, really great example of this. But it's a great way to thank your loyal and supportive backers by giving them access to something earlier than everyone else. And especially if you have a new version of your product or project, this is a really great way to get them to come back for version 2, hopefully. For something like this, you want to go ahead and do this about a week prior to the launch, or even maybe a few days before the launch, not holding out too long. Generally, best practices for this, we allow a maximum of 30 days in the pre-launch perk collection process, but I wouldn't really recommend going longer than 2 weeks. That's when it starts getting kind of weird because then people have given you money and then they're like, okay, well, I'm not going to get this product for how long? This is a little odd. So you just want to keep it as short as possible while still getting a good idea and testing with your initial audience. So speaking of testing, product testing is really, really important here. This is a way for you to figure out maybe what versions of your product people are actually interested in. And so if you happen to have multiple products, if you happen to have a lots of different prices that you're working through, this is kind of the best time to get that testing done. So some quick examples we've got for all of these. For the soft launch, the Sobro did a great job with this. This was their second product that they launched, and they really wanted to figure out if people were interested in something like a side table versus what they were first offering, which was a coffee table. And they only ran this for about 13 days. They raised around 100,000 prior to launching, and again, they brought an existing audience to the page, and they just wanted to make sure that this is going to be something that would be as much of a hit as their original campaign. So Light Phone 2 is our second example about giving back. Again, they came to this campaign with a really strong local community. Their original Light Phone backers are super involved in the process, and they wanted to know what was going on at all steps. And so this was a cool way for them to be able to perhaps give them an early deal or get them to come back. And so they actually raised around 25,000 in just 2 days, which is really, really amazing. And so on day one, when they launched, they didn't start with 0, they started with 25,000, which gets you a lot further. And then product testing, the example that we have here is actually MochaCam. So MochaCam was also on their second or third product by this point, and they had developed a whole lot of products before they ran this Indiegogo campaign, and they just weren't sure which one was actually going to be a success. And so they had 2 versions of the product, the 4K Wi-Fi and the 1080p cloud. And they weren't sure how they should focus those efforts and focus their money. And so what they did is they allowed the audience to pick the products from the dropdown, and then based off of that, they decided what to actually focus the campaign on. And so They just kind of discarded the original one or figured they would focus on it later on when they developed it more. And this really saved them a lot of time and money throughout the actual campaign. So when doesn't this work? This is a really exciting new development, I think, but it's not always super successful. And we've been testing it for a few months now. And one of the things I think we've all learned is that if you're launching in stealth, this is not a great idea because what this means is this is actually fully public. This isn't something that's just searchable for your audience. It will be available on Indiegogo. If you are waiting to actually release any press about this until much later, not a great idea. If you are still in the lead collection process and if you are coming at this with 0 people, you really don't want to focus your pre-launch efforts on people purchasing. You want to instead use the original version of the pre-launch, which is to collect the leads and the emails. And then eventually you can actually go ahead and start collecting pledges. But you do really want to focus first on actually getting people to the table. And then obviously you want to check your price point. If it's like a $2,000 product, probably not a good time to do it. The pre-launch perk and the pre-launch page is again super distilled, and there's not a whole lot of information there. Usually for something that's like $2,000, people might need more than a short video and 4 features. So this is maybe when you should wait till your actual campaign to get that sort of backer on board. And so this is just kind of like a great little general overview. For those of you who are really interested in things like promotions, et cetera, we've had a lot of other webinars in the past that have focused more on that. So feel free to go ahead and watch those. And we are always hosting new ones. So if you have any ideas for new webinars, please do let us know. But in the meantime, let's move on to our second section, which is a case study where we are talking to Joe from Lightphone. So everyone say hi to Joe.
Hey everyone, Joe here from the Lightphone.
So Lightphone, I've spoken about it a little bit, and I've just kind of mentioned the name a few times. Everyone is saying hi. And so Joe, just really quickly, if you could give like a short overview of what the actual product is for those of us who don't know what it is, that would be really helpful, I think.
Yeah, so the Lightphone is basically a intentionally stripped down cell phone that is very small in its form factor. The original one was the size of a credit card, and it's what we call designed to be used as little as possible as a way to step away from your smartphone from time to time and experience life without distractions or notifications while still maintaining that peace of mind that you have a phone. God forbid you need to get a hold of a roommate, girlfriend, relative, but really a way to carve out that space in our day-to-day lives to focus on what matters most to us without sort of diluting that with the distractions that we're so used to sort of bringing with us everywhere so constantly. So we called the first one your phone away from phone.
I really love that. I think if whoever hasn't seen the video, I would really recommend doing it. The Light Fund is still actually live on Indiegogo, and I believe you guys are still collecting orders. So yeah, go ahead and take a watch for the video. I think it does a really good job of summarizing why you might want something like this, even for those of us who are super addicted to their devices. I think you can see the real benefit in maybe having some moments of Zen away from it and having something a little different. So I think what's really nice about the Light Phone is it's not the sort of product that's looking for a solution. It's really, really obvious what it does and why you guys were compelled to create this. Just like from a creator's standpoint, I'm really interested to hear like how you actually went from deciding what you wanted to create and actually making this happen. So for those of you who don't know, Joe's background is he's actually an artist. He's not like a hardware guy to start with. So it's kind of a huge leap for you to make.
Yeah, I guess to really quickly sort of give you a backstory, about just over 3.5 years ago, Google had an experiment here in New York City where they invited about a dozen or so designers from around the world to participate in an experiment to see if given some resources and guidance, would designers be able to create a new breed of smartphone apps? And part of that for me was kind of diving into how and why these apps were being built and funded. And I think I learned quite quickly that a lot of the motivation behind apps and the business models were about really engineering them to keep people hooked so that you could collect data, sell ads, and scale it infinitely very cheaply. And it was a very VC friendly sort of, time and time again, model that we saw, but then they sort of would throw a design in at the last mile, wrap it up with a pretty little ribbon that said, "We want to make the world a better place," in quotes. And I just sort of felt, wow, the last thing the world needs is another smartphone app. If I were to make a smartphone app, it would be to get off my smartphone. And we were sort of inspired by things like AOL Instant Messenger and Way messages, and just being conscious of, when we were on the internet and when we were off the internet. And I think we had kind of forgotten about that. And I thought about my life, and some of my happiest moments as an artist were really unplugging for 8 hours at a time and getting lost in my work. And I think we'd kind of forgotten that when we bring Instagram into the studio with us. It's really easy to get distracted or self-conscious in a way that maybe not productive. But there's a million things that one could do with the light phone. And so had this idea in this program, and I met my co-founder in the same program, and he actually did have a phone making background. So it sort of was a really like stars aligning kind of moment that we met. And we pitched the idea for about 8 months and did some little testing with flip phones, and we really came to realize that the value in what our phone offered wasn't in any sort of feature set, but rather the lack of smartphone. We called this experience going light, and we felt, that the more invisible the light phone was, the less that it was used, the more effective it was at achieving its goal. But we also sort of ran into the fact that, hardware is really expensive. There's a lot of upfront costs that aren't necessarily easily digestible by like traditional investors that we were speaking to. So although we had this kind of really polarizing, interesting conversation starting product that people either loved or kind of hated, we knew that we were going to need some sort of help to prove that there was a valid market. So that's why we turned to crowdfunding. And so in May of 2015, we launched our first Kickstarter campaign. And that really gave us not only some of the funds to start off the development, but also the kind of validation of, press being a huge one, to just show that, wow, this is a sort of international, universal phenomenon, and that, maybe there is some merit to the light phone idea. And, it's definitely been a learning process for me, having never really had ambitions to launch a company or make a hardware product. But, I sort of saw it personally as a kind of sculptural idea. And if you fall in love with an idea enough, you'll kind of do anything you have to see it through. So, you learn along the way.
Yeah, I think the thing that you mentioned about like not really wanting to be super connected to your devices really speaks to your approach towards even the pre-launch portion. You guys didn't do what a lot of campaigners do, which is have a huge budget and spend a lot of money on ads. And so I think your experience in running the pre-launch is like really, really valuable. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to share your case study with this audience, because not everyone here has $700,000 just right off the bat to spend on testing and iterating on tons and tons of Facebook ads. So that's really cool. I think you guys were in a really fortunate position in that you had already launched your first campaign. You had an audience who was excited to hear more about what was going on. Can you give us a closer look at what the pre-launch phase actually looked like for this product, and kind of how you guys went about prepping your audience for it?
Yeah, so our pre-launch was quite quick, compared to, I think the other example had 2 weeks. We were just about 2.5 days prior to our launch. We launched our Indiegogo pre-launch, and I think we really wanted to, we have all these existing users. Some of them were our very first Kickstarter backers, and some of them had maybe just gotten their light phone a month prior to launching this new campaign. So we really wanted to like softly introduce it to our like core backers who, it was a surprise to some of them perhaps that we were launching a new product, like trying to empathize with the users that, imagine you just got a light phone a month ago and now they introduce a new one. So it gave us a way to really personally talk to those people and specifically explain how this phone is different, and it's not actually going to ship for probably another year, like, to really address it on a one-to-one basis with these sort of micro communities, the Kickstarter backers. Were very critical of why we were making a new phone and what we had maybe fell short on the original phone, and being sort of overly honest in a way that, maybe isn't how you'd want to sell a new product, but, realizing that these were the people that forgave us for shipping late and went through the trials and tribulations with us. So, being able to be honest with them, share the video, and get that kind of initial feedback. I mean, we had shared with our very close friends, family, and, some of the power users, but to really be able to launch and not only get their feedback and sort of explain to them what we were doing ahead of time, but also we had the bandwidth, because launching the campaign, if it goes the way you hope and imagine it might, becomes like a crazy, overwhelming amount of inquiries and questions. So by doing that 2 days prior, all the Kickstarter backers, we were able to be really attentive and answer them almost immediately. And that was really important to us because we knew how they helped us get from nothing to where we were. And so the other side of that was being able to offer them, the absolute cheapest price, pretty much cost, for the phone, as a sort of thank you. You supported us, we delivered the best we could, and it fell short in these other ways, but here we are on this mission. And I think a lot of our backers really did feel that they weren't just buying a product but actually supporting you know something that they believed in deeper than just one phone, but rather like a more mission based company.
I think that's really amazing. You guys, I know, had a really vocal audience, to put it really politely. So you guys did a really, really good job with community management. Did you guys, how did you actually primarily communicate with these backers, the original ones, and how did you sort of segment those audiences?
I mean, you know, Kickstarter backers, we used that channel to talk to them directly, but we had MailChimp was sort of our main platform, and within that, we could kind of break down users into, like, did they buy a phone? So existing users versus just our kind of like larger newsletter where people had maybe been to our site and were curious what Light was doing, but had not purchased a phone, or maybe they're interested in a phone and we were sold out of Light phones. So we had kind of segregated them that way into different groups. Like, I mean, it was pretty simple, mostly just like Kickstarter backers being our, closest users, existing users, and then kind of general people that had emailed us. And we sort of rolled out the pre-launch to those over time. So Kickstarter's backers got it. Once we sort of digested that wave, we emailed the existing users, which was a little bit larger. And then, prior to actually launching the campaign, we did finally email the larger newsletter group, but it was mostly through email that we did it.
It's a smart tactic to break down your audience that way, just because you also, for you guys, the Kickstarter audience was your core audience, and they were most likely to likely convert because they already knew a whole lot about your product. And then you had the second round that might actually need a full page to convert. So just as a general point for the rest of you guys, if you can segment your audience and not send 100% of your audience to the pre-launch page, a great idea. That way you actually still have momentum in the few days after you launch your actual campaign. Um, One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about was that you guys, like I said, you didn't have a huge budget. How did you guys actually, what were the tactics that you guys used to get some of the pledges in without having a budget to start with?
I mean, I think we in designing the second generation of the phone, we didn't initially set out when we launched the first Light phone to create a second Light phone, but a lot of the decisions and improvements in the phone were directly from feedback from our Kickstarter backers. So I think in the way that we emailed them, we really made it clear, like, this is the things that we have heard from you guys, and this is how we're addressing it. So sort of really answering, why Light Phone 2, and it's like almost directly related to what they were asking for. So it was in a way sort of like, being like, here it is. And that really helped because it was so one to one like that.
Hmm. And you guys also, this was a good use of press for you guys as well, right? So this is did you end up sending any press to the pre-launch page?
So I mean, we had been quite lucky that throughout the sort of light phone journey, we haven't actually spent any money on outgoing marketing. And so the press has been a huge outlet for us. And I think we've been lucky that our product does sort of start a conversation, whether or not you ever buy a light phone. I think the underlining questions, whatever side of, the sort of debate you fall on, it's an interesting debate about how technology fits in our life and where we would like to see technology go, and what is life. It really can get quite broad, but I think we knew that the topic was interesting, and so we tried our best to keep that relationship with the press between the Light Phone 1 and the Light Phone 2 sort of friendly. And then we know in the similar vein, we had a press email separate bucket that we had showed the page a couple of days before, and even like said, what do you guys think? Because some of them we had communications back and forth a dozen or two times. We were like, hey, like, what do you think of the page? And so that was good to be able to have press queued up, because I think it was someone from The Verge. They saw it and they're like, awesome, we'll write about it right at your launch. So it was really reassuring for us to like be able to share something with them and have some press lined up. But that also snowballs a lot. So, not all of our press came the first day. Um,
I think one of the other ways that you guys did a lot of testing beforehand is through actual user testing, right? So you guys, I think, might have used usertesting.com to test the page, both the pre-launch and the actual campaign, with audiences that hadn't already been exposed to it. And we sort of touched on that earlier in the first part of the webinar, how important it is to run the page by new people and new eyeballs. You guys, did you feel like you got some pretty good learnings out of that?
Yeah, I think there was sort of like the existing users and what they thought, and then people who had never heard of us or the Light Phone ever and what they thought. And actually, the existing users, we realized that we were asking which model of the new Light Phone, which really just meant what region of the phone you wanted, was like a huge confusion. We thought it was sort of like really understood. And we also realized that it wasn't a question we actually needed to ask yet, because we have a year to sort of work with our backers and figure out which model works best for them. So, quickly into the pre-launch, we realized like, wow, let's change the perk. Let's take away that option, because that's a confusing hurdle to them checking out and committing. So we learned that very tangible thing in the pre-launch. Some of the new people who we use from user testing that never heard of the Light Phone, some of it wasn't necessarily that there was like tangible changes we made, but rather it was a little bit of like affirmation, like, oh wow, someone who's never heard of this phone is sort of able to understand from just the little paragraph and just the little video teaser why we're making this phone and how they might use it in their life. And so that was really interesting. And then the couple of questions they had, I was able to make sure that those were located higher up, perhaps in the story page of the actual campaign. And so it was minor changes. Obviously it was 2 days before, so we couldn't do sweeping overhauls. But I think there was like some subtle optimizations. This is a little confusing. How does that work? Okay, let's answer that question higher up. I'm having trouble thinking of a specific example, but I would say it was like, yeah, subtle optimization, but also, just, you're so nervous launching this new phone, this new product, just to be a little bit more assured that, okay, like someone who's never heard of this kind of gets it, made coming into Thursday when we actually launched a little bit easier.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want any like curveballs on day one of launch, and this sort of gives you that chance to like field any of the big ones. That's really cool. I think I have a few more questions, but I'm actually also seeing a few interesting questions in the comment section, and so we definitely want to save the last 10 or so minutes for that. So just let me really quickly see. So I think between you launched with the pre-launch perk this time, and like I said, there are some benefits to not launching with one. Do you feel like in the end that there would have been a benefit to launching without one, or do you feel pretty okay with the decision to go this way?
I think for our particular product and the sort of existing users that we felt really sensitive to, especially those that had just gotten the existing phone. We really wanted to make sure that they didn't just hear about this on some website or some press and get offended, like, why didn't they tell me there? So we really wanted to make sure they felt exclusive, because we really did see them in that way, not like the illusion of exclusive.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it gave us a great way to kind of introduce them to the idea before it launched, and I think they appreciated that. So I really do think it worked out for that. Maybe if we hadn't had our original campaign, I could see the pre-launch, maybe even without the perk, as a great way to sort of collect emails and that sort of thing, which we did 3.5 years ago, but it was just through like a little Squarespace website or something, like a little landing page. But it's nice that it would be streamlined in the same place, the same link that the campaign would launch on.
Okay, that's awesome. I think for my final question, before we get into the questions for everyone else, if you had to do this again, do you think there's anything big during this phase that you would have really done differently?
Perhaps launch it earlier, more than 2 days. I think we did get some feedback that some of our early Kickstarter backers, although they got the email 2 days before, people were really busy, emails get sent to spam. So I think a little bit more time couldn't have hurt. We could have done a little bit more testing, a little bit more optimization, but we were really down to the wire of,
Yeah.
we're going to launch, we're going to launch, we're going to launch. But I think, yeah, time definitely would have been probably the one thing I might have done differently.
Yeah. Was this the first time some of these backers were hearing about the new project, or had you kind of started planting the seeds beforehand?
We had planted the seed a little bit. In general, I would say that whole build-up of teasing the product, we probably could have done a lot more teasing and gotten email sign-ups specific to this. There had been people asking for some of these features, whether it was 4G or texting. Like people from Australia, for instance, we had a lot of backers on original campaign from Australia. Halfway through the development, Australia stopped the 2G network. We refunded them all their money, but there was all these people in that region that wanted the light phone, and we took their emails in, but we didn't have like I think it could have been nice to have a specific, this is what the new light phone is, it's coming and it's going to work in Australia, or something like that. We probably could have done a better job of teasing it up, because it was really subtle and a lot of in like one-to-one conversations with people. Um, so we probably could have done a better job of teasing it, but I think it wasn't the biggest surprise ever. I think, like I said, we really tried to one-to-one address the biggest issues that we heard from our user feedback of the first phone.
Yeah. That's really helpful. Thanks, Joe. Let's go ahead and move on really quickly to some of the questions that people might actually have. Sorry, guys, I'm going to take a second to like actually scroll through some of these and see. Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of questions about building an audience. Wow, I love this. You guys are actually having conversations amongst yourselves. That's always great to see. So for just a technical question, can we utilize this right away? So I'm actually going to be sending out an email afterwards. It'll have recording for this. It'll also have a link to a form that you can fill out if you're interested in this. This is something that we're going to be opening up for just a few days. Because this is very much still in beta, and we just really wanted to introduce this to you and introduce some of the learnings that we've gotten over the last month or so of testing this out. And so if you have a current draft available on Indiegogo, we can go ahead and activate this for you for a select number of you guys. And then actually the product is going to be going live really, really soon. And so this is pretty cool. Even if you don't get it now, if you guys are launching in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, it's pretty likely that you'll already have this built in. So, so yeah, you guys, just let us know if you're interested, and we're gonna ask for a few details about your project, and then, yeah, go ahead and let us know. So, some of the questions that we have gotten, there's a technical question earlier on from Denise who was asking, we're running a pre-launch campaign now. How can we tell how many emails we've received? You should be able to check that on your dashboard. Actually, the best thing I would do here is go ahead and reach out to our trust and our support team, and they can go ahead and either download the CSV for you and send it your way, or just teach you how to actually go about doing that. Um, and so the back early option, how do we get that? Like I said, just go ahead and fill out the form that we're going to be sending out. And yeah, there was an interesting question earlier from Ray who asked, does it make sense to offer to enter into a drawing for a free perk in exchange for their email address? Is that ever done? Um, so it can get a little bit complicated on Indiegogo. We don't necessarily allow for raffles due to our terms of service. But what you can offer is a super, super, super discounted perk, maybe something for $1 for the winner or something like that. And another way to do this is to run actual referral contests. And this is something that's a little more useful when the campaign actually gets started. But you know, the great thing about a pre-launch perk is you can just offer it on mega discount for the people that get there. So because you can switch out the perks throughout the pre-launch process, even if you find that like 10 is the maximum you can offer for a really, really low price, offer just 10 of those. And when those sell out, you can offer it at a slightly higher price point. Or you can just decide to go ahead and launch because clearly you guys are getting some traction. So you can really play around with this, and this is a really interesting phase where you can sort of test what works and what doesn't without too much of a public face to kind of get egg on your face. Um, and so I think earlier someone asked what the purpose of collecting emails was. Again, this is really just so that you don't launch in a vacuum, and so you start with a higher chance of success. That 30%, the reason I mentioned that that was important is because that's usually where we see people start converting when this is the first time that they're seeing the page. Everyone who has gotten emails from you beforehand is more likely to convert on day one, even if there's nothing on the page, because they've already spent some time with you and they've already received a lot of correspondence about this. So once you actually get the emails, we do have some information about this in some previous webinars, but just to briefly go over it, you don't want to just sit on those emails. You really do want to actually message those people. I would recommend messaging them immediately afterwards with some really exciting content, maybe a new picture of the product or the project or some behind the scenes looks, or even if you've got some like early beta tester, like user testimonials, this is a really cool place to get that out into people's inboxes. What you want to do is you want to make the product sticky for people, and so that way they don't just sign up and give you their email and then totally forget about you. This is just something to keep them excited. You don't want to spam people, so don't just because you have their email doesn't give you like free permission to send them an email every single day. I would really not recommend doing that. If you're building up and you've got 3 months, then like maybe one email per month, or if you have a lot of content to get out, consider a little more, but you really don't want to exceed that. Um, and yes, Mary Sue is asking enough qualified leads so you can fund at 30% in 24 or 48 hours at a 5% conversion rate. Yeah, 5% is generally what we see for email lists. It can be a lot higher than that. It can be a little lower than that. What really matters is how qualified that list is and how much time you've spent working through them. So I'm seeing a lot of questions that don't necessarily have to relate, don't necessarily relate to pre-launch perks. So there are some questions about the Arrow program and some other things. Definitely reach out to our support team here and they can fill you in and connect you to the correct team that will get you connected there. So let's see. Can you use more than one video on your live campaign? Yes, you can have one video that opens up the campaign and then afterwards include as many as you'd like. Let's see. Do pre-launch numbers get added to the campaign page once it launches, like backer numbers, funds raised so far, etc.? Yeah, all of this is actually visible to you as the campaigner, and it's going to be added to your grand total. And once you go live, all of this will be publicly visible. What's the difference between a teaser video and the other one? Joe, did you guys have a teaser video during your pre-launch, or?
We actually, I think I might have said that, but I do think we used the exact same video.
Okay.
Mostly because it was only 2 days away and we really wanted to get feedback. But in retrospect, it might have been nice to maybe a month ahead of time or a couple of weeks launch a video that was didn't maybe give away all of the details, but really just tease that, hey guys, we're have something new in the works. So it's a way, I guess, to show the product, but still leave some of the surprises there, so that there's some still like excitement, and you're not people would want to come back and try again. And maybe you wouldn't want that if you were actually had a product perk, but if you're just collecting emails, you know, also, people's time and attention is so fought for in a million other ways that if you can convey your video or your idea in as little as possible, that's probably to your advantage.
Yeah, yeah. 30 seconds for a teaser video is a good idea. For your general product video, under 3 minutes is also ideal. If you can get it to 2 minutes, you're in like great shape. But all there's also outliers for everything. I've seen amazing campaign videos that kept me hooked for like 5 to 7 minutes. Don't recommend it, but maybe you've got the one product. So just something to keep in mind as like some general thoughts. Um, Someone asked, with the pre-launch page provided by Indiegogo, is there still a need for a .com outside of Indiegogo? Yeah, some campaigners will have multiple places that they live on the internet, and some people will just use the landing page that you can create for your campaign. It's really up to you. The thing I will mention, and I say this as someone who works at Indiegogo, the pre-launch version of the page that we have, due to the very nature of the platform, it's pretty limited. And so what this means is we have like some really specific sections that you can fill out, and some specific things. If you're finding that for your purposes, it's better for you to have more control over what the look is, by all means, go ahead and host it elsewhere. I think what's important is that you have a pre-launch where you're actually putting your mark on the internet prior to actually launching, so that the first time people see you isn't your campaign. And so if you need to host it elsewhere, cool. Sometimes people will host both at the same time, and that's also helpful, especially if they're using Facebook ads or doing any digital spend. They can kind of see which one converts better for them. You can A/B test both pages and see which one is really worth your ad spend. Um, let's see. Um, um, Someone has a question for you, Joe, and I don't know if you feel comfortable answering this, but what was your split between US and the rest of the world? Were you guys?
I think it's and it's varied throughout, but I think it's generally about 2/3, 1/3. But I can verify that. But I think it's about 2/3 U.S. and 1/3 international.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's like probably in line with most hardware campaigns. Um, And so someone is asking for in detail the pre-launch perk option. Does it have a limit? Yeah, so for some technical answers for this, it works just like when you're setting up a regular perk. And so you can set limits on the amount available. If you want just 5 or 10, that's cool. If you want to do 20, 30, 500, that's fine as well. Or you can just set an unlimited amount and switch it out. The way it works is you would just feature the perk in question, and that's what becomes visible on the page. Again, this is really only available to people that have been opted in to the experiment. And so, like I said, we're going to be sending out that survey. Once it's done, we'll send you some instructions. So don't worry, we won't just like throw you into the deep end. We'll tell you exactly how this works. Um, and so, let's see. Um, yeah, so there's some questions about building the audience email list. Actually, Donna, we have a whole webinar that's fully about this. I'd really recommend giving that a watch. And it's a pretty lengthy topic, and really it requires quite a bit of skill. And so there's only so much we can cover in an hour, but we did a pretty good job of breaking down some 101 content. So we do have a lot of Indiegogo webinars available online already, and we will send out a link to that page so that way you can give those a watch as well. And so someone asked, does the pre-launch perks, do the perks count towards achieving your goal? Can you reach it before you even go live? Yeah, you absolutely can. And again, that's one of the benefits. That way, when you go live, you're just already at 100%. Joe, was that the case for you guys?
We were at 10%, so I think our goal was 250,000. We had raised just over 25. So when we launched, we were 1/3 of the way of that sort of 30% mark. Not 100% of our goal, but I don't think we expected that because it was such a short page. People really had to just trust. There wasn't a lot of details about the phone. It was just a high level, hey, we are making a phone that has X, Y, and Z, and that was about all it said on our pre-launch. Um, but I think we were impressed to have that 10%, and it was nice that that morning at 10 a.m. when we launched, there was 25% already. I mean 10%, sorry.
Cool. So, um, let me see if there's any other questions that we can go ahead and highlight here. Someone is asking how many people were on your team, Joe, when you guys were working on this?
We've fluctuated, but I mean, to be completely honest, between the two phones, money had gotten really tight, and we had shrunk down to just about three of us. So Kaiway and I were the ones answering emails and stuff. So I mean, you don't necessarily need a huge team to do all of this. Uh, it gets quite overwhelming, but if it's working, there's a lot of excitement in the air, and you find yourself easily getting through those hundreds of emails or comments that come through. But I think it was really just three of us in the New York office. Um, yeah.
Has this become your full-time job now?
Yes, it's more or less been my full-time job since about 3.5 years ago. Uh, that doesn't always mean that I've gotten a paycheck for it, but yeah.
I'm sure everyone here knows the life of the entrepreneur is eating a lot of ramen. Um, cool, you guys. Thank you so much for an amazing webinar and these great questions. If for any other questions that we didn't manage to get to, our support team is really responsive. They tend to get to you within 24 hours. So please feel free to write in. There will be some follow-up, and we will be sending out some great material, especially with some of the things that we mentioned. We'll also be sending links to the campaigns that we highlighted. That way you guys can take a look to see some of the things they did right and maybe take some of those learnings from them. Feel free to give this a watch whenever we send it out. Thanks again, guys, for joining and being so, so great as always. All right, take care, guys.
Bye bye. Good luck.